Hi folks, I just want to go through the Matric year-to-date mark for the trials reports at the moment that there seems to be a little bit of confusion with. Basically in the past you would have entered a mark directly into either the term 3 or the term 5 column, the RD3 or the RD5 column in FrontOFFICE, depending on what your report, your trials report referenced. So for instance, if I open this trials report, just a mock trials report, and I look at the column, there's one set of column marks on this report. This particular report, okay, so it references term 3. In other words, it goes to look for whatever is captured in the term 3 column. So you could have entered a mark for your grade 12s in previous years. That was a year-to-date mark that the teachers may have been calculating on their mark sheets on the side. And even though you're putting it in the term 3 column, it wasn't a term 3 mark itself. It was the year-to-date mark. This is why I've moved away from calling these columns term 3. The reference, the field itself is still the term 3 field. The reference is term 3 behind the scenes, but the labeling of these things and the way we refer to them is RD3. Okay, so the point is that by putting it in RD3 and by telling your report to go and look at RD3 or term 3, that is the mark that then jumps onto the report. Now if I go to the aggregate in this particular case, you'll see that the aggregate looks up AG3. Okay, in other words, it's being told to, when you run your AG3 calc, your AG3 calculation, it takes everything captured in term 3 and works out the result. Okay, what you could actually do in theory is you could reference AG-Y, so you could tell it, alright, I've captured term 3 marks, I've captured them into term 3, but if I go to set classes and I tell all the grade 12 classes to be 001, alright, I don't have that extra weighting option, so I'll just show you quickly how we add a weighting. Many of you will know this already, it's always good for a recap. I can actually go here and change this just like that, and then all of them in that set classes will change to being 0010. Just be careful, if you do that you're going to change it for all the grades. So what you probably want to be doing is leaving whatever is in there and creating a new one. And so then what you can do is go back to set classes, filter on grade 12 equals 12, right click on that so it highlights the whole thing, copy, and then what you can do is highlight that column and go replace that with, change that to a 0, that to a 1, replace all. Sorry, that didn't quite work as expected. I thought I could get sneaky. Oh, the other thing was, and I'd noticed this with some people using weightings, please make sure that you've got noughts where you aren't using weightings all the way across, because we've added 7 to 12 in recent times, and they didn't, they'll have blanks in them. New ones you add will default to 0, but they'll have blanks in them, and they need to have zeros in them to tell them that we're not using that mark in terms of the year calculation. Alright, so back in your set classes, filter on 12. Okay, so yeah, just choose the second weighting. Alright, well I think what you can do is you can say Control C and then go down, Control V. Yes, you can do that. Alright. And what you're doing then is you're telling it, right, use the year today, use the year calculation, but don't look at any of the other marks I've captured in the year, only the mark I've captured in the RD3 column. So it's the same. It's the same as in this case, the way this aggregate is set up, the year calc will be exactly the same as the Ag3 calc. So the way it's set up right now, I could, in theory, go to my calculation, tell it to use RD3, click AgGP 1 to 12 calc, and it'll focus on, it'll use the RD3 marks and put it into the Ag3, which is exactly what your aggregate field on the report references, Ag3. Or alternatively, you could just go to the year-to-date calc and click it. It doesn't need this RD3 in it, but what it is doing is it's going to see all the marks that a child has got for a subject, and then it looks to see what it must do with those marks. So even if they've got marks in RD1, 2, 5, if it sees that they've only got a 1 in the third, for the third number in the weighting, it's only going to regard what is in the RD3 column. So it's just another way of doing the same thing. It'll become slightly relevant now when we just go through. So that was in the case where teachers before had entered a year-to-date mark directly into FrontOFFICE. So what does it mean now if you've used the mark sheet and you've used the formula? Okay, so if you use the term 3 mark sheet, something like this for instance, and you put a formula in here, those formulas were purely for the term 3 mark. So if you've come into this mark sheet and you've put a 3 above that, and you had some marks in these things for the SAMs to push through to SAMs, and you've done a report mark calculation, the mark here gets pushed through to term 3, but this is only for these tasks for term 3. So in other words, this mark is purely a term 3 mark. So now what's going to happen on your report, which is referencing term 3, the mark, or RD3 should I say, is going to be specifically just the term 3 mark. Now, if you want it to be a year-to-date calculation, really, to my mind, that year-to-date calculation is kind of really up to each school as to how they're working it out, because SAMs at this point won't have a year-to-date mark. And if you go to SAMs specifically, you're pushing the marks through to the term 3, and the term 3 calculation will come out exactly as per the term 3 calculation on your mark sheets. And so the point of that is sort of to have your term 3 mark in FrontOFFICE, the report mark, matching the SAM's report mark for term 3. Okay. Again, you know, what some people have done is said, there's so many ways you can skin the cat, because what some people have done is said, we're not using the formula the way Blaze has laid it out, in the sense that we actually want to represent 2 marks on our report. We actually want to represent, let's say, a test mark, which in this case, let's say, was the oral, okay, and that was weighted at 17, and then we want to show the separate mark for the classwork that was done, and that was going to be weighted as 83. So what was possible for you to do then, to come to a term 3 mark, is to push the classwork to term 3, or RD3 in FrontOFFICE. This is when I want to move away from talking about terms in FrontOFFICE, because it can be confusing. So what you do is you push a mark through to FrontOFFICE. This is just in theory, really. So what you want to do is you want to say, okay, I wanted to push a mark through to FrontOFFICE, a class mark, and that class mark was going to be weighted 83. So what you could do is push that class mark through to term 3, okay, and then you could push the oral mark, in this case you'd be calling it your so-called, prac or exam test mark, so to speak, for term 3 to the RD5 column in front office. And then what you do with your class weightings in front office, so then what you can do is on your report you can reference term 3 and term 5, and you can make your labels like class mark and oral mark. Okay, and then you can actually have a term 3 mark sitting there which looks at your weightings in set classes, which then you tell to be 0, 0, 0, and we put a mark into RD3 that we expect to be weighted 83. So you literally do that. You literally make that 83, and then we put a mark into the RD5 column, which was our prac for that month. Okay, for that term, should I say, and you weight that 17. So you would literally take the 5th number and you weight it 17. So you'd weight that 83 and you weight that 17, and that would mean that your term 3 mark on your report would be, let me just go back to the report, sorry. Your term 3 mark on the report itself, you would put the label as term 3, but you would reference the year mark in front office, and that would take the RD3 mark multiplied by 83, the RD5 mark multiplied by 17, work it out to a mark out of 100, and that would be your year to date, or that would be your term 3 marks. You could do that, and then on your mark sheet where you had put a 3 and a 5, sorry, you could have put your 5 above there. Or, yeah, you could put the 5 above there, and you wouldn't actually need to put anything into the report mark, because as I say, that's going to RD3 in front office, that's going to RD5, and then you're weighting it in front office, and the final mark is coming out. And what's more is that it matches SAM's, because those task marks go through to SAM's, and then they follow the 1783, and so the term 3 mark that comes out in front office is exactly the same as your term 3 mark. Okay, but now in the case of the matrics, if you've decided that you want the year-to-date mark to be showing for the matrics, and you've actually ended up pushing a purely a term 3 mark by doing that and calculating the term 3 mark, you're going to be sitting with the term 3 mark sitting in your report, and you've decided, well, I want it to be year-to-date. Now remember, as I say, SAM's doesn't have a year-to-date mark at this point. So, all bets are off in terms of really sticking strictly to what technically would be a year-to-date mark. I mean, for them to have a year-to-date mark, they would need to have written their finals and have their finals marks captured, which basically you can only do in January when they come out. So, your year-to-date mark is going to depend on which marks you've pushed through to front office and how you want to calculate it. So what you could do is, if the teachers have been capturing their own marks on a separate spreadsheet and they've got a year-to-date mark, you see, you won't have, this is term 4 now, you obviously won't have any of this, so you don't have a year mark at this point. SAMS doesn't have a year-to-date mark for you. So if you want to send out a report with a year-to-date mark for the matrics, essentially what you're saying is, well, we've got a term 1 mark, we've got a term 2 mark, some of you put a June exam mark in for them, we've got a term 3 mark, class mark, and some of you might have put another mark in for term 3. Some of you put 2 marks in per term. So for term 1 you use RD1 and RD5. Term 2 you use RD2 and RD6. Term 3 you use RD3 and RD7. Okay, so you would have 6 marks by this point. If you decided now I want to incorporate all of those marks, well, again, it's really up to you how you want to weight all those marks together. But let's just say, for argument's sake, that you've entered a term 1 mark, a term 2 mark, which is actually including this class mark and an exam, and you've entered a term 3 mark, which has come from the mark sheet, what you can do is you can say, well, let's say you want term 2 to count 50% and term 1 and 3 to count 25 each. Well, then you would do something like you'd make your weightings, or not something like, exactly like, you'd make your weightings for grade 12 1 to 1, because then it's going to take the term 2 mark, which you want to count 50%, and double it compared to the other 2 marks. In other words, 1 plus 2 plus 1 is 4. Okay, 2 out of 4 is 50%. That 1 out of 4 is 25%, and that 1 out of 4 is 25%. So there's your weighting sorted. Then what you would have to do is on your report, we'd need to change this to the year mark, which is a thing in FrontOFFICE called mark 6p. It's a calculated field. It goes and uses these weightings and the marks that are put in and it calculates. And the aggregate, we would change this to ag y. So, and then you run your year calc. Okay, and what your year calc will do here is it'll go, and as I say, take the term 1 mark, multiply it by 1, take the term 2 mark, multiply it by 2, take the term 3 mark, multiply it by 1, add them together and divide by 4, the sum of the weightings. And as I say, you can manipulate that in whichever way you want, in whichever marks you want to actually include in the process. A nice way to actually see it represented is, if you want to see your year mark done, is to go to the report that I've always liked, but I've actually done up slightly recently, and that is, so if we go to year position by subject, okay, you can click all. So let's say I click all. I've actually got a full set of marks. For testing purposes, I have marks in all 12 columns. So I like this because it's represented nicely. What I've done is I've added this feature at the top here. So it actually tells you what your weight is for that particular grade and class, for that particular subject and grade. So in this case, you can see we're telling it we only want to use RD4 in our weight. So look at our year mark. It's 88.24. It's exactly the same as these marks, 88.24, 88. If I went and put a 1 here, let's say, it would take RD1 and RD4 and weight them 50-50. So basically this average would become 87.24, because it would become exactly halfway between RD1 and RD4. Okay, it would weight them evenly. So you can actually, this is a good report to come and see actually what's happening when you're controlling your weightings as to what your year mark is that you're getting. So the other thing you can do is you can say to the teachers, alright, so you have a term 3 mark and you have a year-to-date mark that you've calculated. We can't arrive at that mark by what we've captured in FrontOFFICE. Because let's say you've only captured term 1, 2, and 3, you haven't captured enough really in there to represent, say, some of the SBA marks and etc. So what you can do is you can say, well, either what you can do is you can enter the marks directly into FrontOFFICE. That's one option, okay, and just then, if you're going to do that, what I would suggest is on your mark sheets, on the grade 12 mark sheet, you just come and take this 3 out. The reason being is just in case you find that some task marks have to be redone and you have to re-import them to SAMS. When you do that, if you've still got calculations in here and you've gone and entered marks into, let's say you've gone and written over the term 3 marks, the RD3 marks in FrontOFFICE, you've gone to marks and comments and you've re-entered all these RD3 marks as a year-to-date mark as opposed to the term 3 mark that was being pushed through. If you leave the 3 on the mark sheet, it's going to take the old ones that were calculated and overwrite them. But you can avoid that quite simply by removing the 3 off the mark sheet, or by not importing them again. But you know, in my experience, these things do sometimes, you know, happen. Or the other thing you can do is you can come to the mark sheet and you can actually say, sorry, let's go to. You can come to the mark sheet and you can actually say, okay, you know what, I'm going to preserve that term 3 mark that we had in there because I'd quite like to have it on the system. But I want them to put in another column here. Now, I know it says exam at the top of there, but you can just tell them, look, this is going to be pushed into the RD5 column, so it doesn't matter what that label is. And tell them to put the year-to-date marks in there. And then you can, in FrontOFFICE in your Excel manager, sorry, wrong one. In your Excel manager, you can import, you can put those grade 12 marks into their own folder, grade 12 mark sheets into their own folder. And so when you import, it'll import only those. You don't have to click the split task and activity because that's actually been done. It's only if you change task marks that you would have to do that. And then when you post to FrontOFFICE, what you can actually do is just say exclude curriculum data, in other words, tasks and activities, and if you want comment codes even. And so then what it does is it only pushes the final term marks through. So, and you would be pushing them into RD5. Okay, so in that case you would still be preserving your term 3 mark that you calculate, but you're pushing through an RD5 now, and so for your trials report, you are going to want to be then therefore referencing term 5. Okay, so I'm going to show you quickly. If you do that, it's very simple. All right, you quite simply come to that block and you just change that to a 5. All right, and then for your aggregate, you just change this ag 5 from positions 5. That's it. That's all you have to do. And your trials report will now go and look at the mark that you've pushed into term 5. So again, you could come into marks and comments and decide, we're not going to overwrite the term 3 marks we've already pushed in. Let's just put it in a column that we haven't captured in yet. Maybe you do have marks in term 5. Some people put the June exam into the RD5 column. So if you don't have marks in RD6, use RD6. Okay. Again, you could, if on the mark sheet itself, if you want to push them through from the mark sheet, you would just make that a 6. Okay. It doesn't really matter because as long as you just tell it where to reference it from on the report itself, either tell it to go to look at the term 6 reference, or indeed you can tell it to look at the year reference, like I said, and then just make your set classes weighting. You make the 6th number 1 and the rest of them 0s. So you basically have complete control in that sense. And as I say, if you did make it 6 on your trials report, exactly like we just did, oh, sorry, there was one other thing. And that's fine. It'll be enough to show you now. Okay, you click here at the top left and you make this control source. Instead of cumulative 3, you make it cumulative 5. Now some of you might have your school suffix there for custom record sources. That's fine. It'll still say cumulative 5, let's say KHS afterwards. You just change that you just change the number that's relevant. Okay, so what you're telling it is find it from the record set. Now again, if you pushed your marks into RD6, okay, just change the record set to cumulative 6. Okay, If you wanted the year result to be coming out, so in other words, you want the year, you've pushed through a term 3 mark, but you want to do a year to date based on the term 1 to the RD1, RD2, RD3, or RD1, 2, 3, 4, 5, however many you've entered, and you want to use the set classes weightings like I demonstrated, then you would put cumulative year, okay, and in this, so let's do that, so you would say cumulative year, okay, and you would say, as I explained before, our year reference is our year reference is a thing called Mark 6P. Okay, like that, and then what you do is you tell your aggregate, you tell your rating code to be FET rate Y. You tell your grade average to be year AVG from averages year, and you tell your aggregate to be from positions year, ag year from positions year. And you can tell your result to come from a thing called FET result Y. Let's change the 3 to a Y, and report 3M. If it says report 3, just change it to report Y. If it says report 3M, take the 3 and the M out and change it to report Y. Okay. Okay, that FET result Y, that must be. Okay, there's no need, don't worry about any of this stuff or any of these lookups, only these first 2 bits in square brackets in these lookup fields. In other words, the aggregate, the trials, and the grade average. Alright, you just do just follow as I say. Again, as I say, if let's say you push the mark through to RD5, you change the cumulative year record source to cumulative 5. You change the learner percentage reference to term 5. You change the rating code to FET rate 5. Okay. You change the grade average to T5 AVG from averages 5. Okay, you tell the aggregate to come from ag 5 from positions 5, and you tell the trials result to be report 5 from FET result 5. Okay, so yeah, just to recap, I'm going to go back to my trustee report, trustee summary for the year, and so if you have pulled a mark into front office that is in the RD3 column and it is actually only the term 3 mark, and you want to display a year-to-date mark, basically in short, you can either pull that year-to-date mark in, whether you pull it from the mark sheets as I showed you, or whether you enter it straight into front office. You can either enter it over the RD3 marks that you already have there, but then you won't have term 3 marks of their own accord saved into front office, which doesn't really matter. If that's the report you want to send out, it's just for the grade 12s. So it's not like you later on are going to have to bring a term 3 mark into the equation. The nice thing about doing it that way is that you don't have to change any references on the reports. If, however, you want to preserve the term 3 mark you have pulled into the matrix, but you want to bring in the year-to-date mark as well, then you can bring it into a blank column. Let's say it's RD5. Okay, and then on the reports, you can either go and change everything to 5s, as I showed you before, to reference 5s, and then that's what the report will show, the calculation will show, so the year weighting doesn't come into the picture. But if you go to the reports and you reference the marks XP and the averages Y and all the year references, then what you're saying is, I am going to take the year weightings into account. And if you've entered the year-to-date mark into RD5 and you only want it to show that mark, then you make your weightings for all the grade 12 classes 0, 0, 0, 0, 1. Alright, and it'll only show that. You'll see that that'll be the one that'll show at the end. And or if you are happy that you've brought the term 3 mark into front office and it's only a term 3 mark, and that you're happy that you want it, quite simply you are able to arrive at a satisfactory year-to-date mark based on the marks you already have in front office. Let's say, for instance, only term 1 and term 2. You can then just go and put a weighting into set classes that weights term 1, 2, and 3 the way you would like to weight them in combination. Okay, as I showed you before, if you wanted term 2 to count 50, it would be 1, 2, 1, and this mark would be an amalgamation with these marks according to the weighting. As I say, some schools have entered for their subjects 2 marks per term, like say RD1 and RD5 for term 1, RD2, RD6 for term 2, and RD3 and RD7 for term 3, where the RD1, 2, and 3 were the class marks, and the 6, 7, and 8 were prac/exam/test, whatever they were for that particular subject. And if, again, they would have followed the weighting according to each subject for that mark, those particular mark sheets. So in other words, if they had decided that, if they had looked at SAMs and said, for each situation where I had